All right. Good morning, Doug. Today am in Tucson, Arizona. You still are in Uruguay. Um, I wanted to go through a series of questions that we got from one of our viewers. This person, her name is Emily. She's commented regularly on the different posts that we do. She always has a good perspective and good questions, and she's clearly followed your work for a long time. Um, so she just wanted. So let me just start off by going through and reading her first paragraph here with a question at the end. She says, the quotations from the meditations book that Doug recommends sounds an awful like the spiritual slash religious dogma of Christianity. The concept of a soul, the reality of good versus evil, imperfection of mankind, and the moral guidance to strive to be better, to be something better. Human actions matter and impact the world, etc. Even the sense of turning the other cheek is echoed in meditations with, quote, live out your life in truth and justice, tolerant to those who are neither true nor just. What about the Ten Commandments? They echoed Doug Casey's values. The country was founded on Judeo-Christian values. What does Doug think? And essentially, it's getting the question about religion and, you know, and what your reviews are on this ultimate of third rail topics.
Okay, it's a good question and a sincere question. And it's certainly one that's worth discussing, and people are afraid to discuss because, like you said, it's a third rail type of question. I guess my first comment is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Well, he was far from a Christian. He was one of the relatively few Roman empires that actively persecuted Christians because he felt that they were morally destructive. That's a view that I have, and Edward Gibbon has, who wrote Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. And once again, I'd invite anybody that would like to read the essay that I wrote, about 10,000 words, so it's a long read, about how Christianity fit into the collapse of the Roman Empire. So anyway, regarding the first part of Emily's question, no, Marcus Aurelius was highly moral, and his meditations are a superb work, well worth reading. Oddly enough, here's a fun fact. Bill Clinton says it's the most important book he ever read, but you'd never guess it from looking at the rest of Bill's life. Anyway, just a fun fact. Anyway, no, nothing to do with Christianity. And the next thing, concept of a soul, the reality of good versus evil, and so forth. Well, turning the other cheek. Well, that's definitely not Marcus Aurelius either. I mean, that book is a gem of wisdom, but my recollection is there's nothing about turning the other cheek in it, because actually, it was that part of Christianity which Marcus, and for that matter, Gibbon, and for that matter, myself, thinks are among its most destructive contributions to world philosophy.
Why?
I mean, sometimes you gotta fold them, but most of the time, it's a bad idea to turn the other cheek. It's a better idea, generally, to adopt a tit-for-tat philosophy. In other words, somebody hits you, you hit them back. And then you don't do anything unless he hits you again, then you hit him back. And after a while, you know, the aggressor will learn, oh, maybe I shouldn't hit this guy anymore. But if you turn the other cheek, you're just inviting trouble. So I'd have to argue on that. And Marcus certainly didn't believe that. I'd like to have the quote that says that he does. And that,
Doug, one of the things that I just want to say, I was just going to say, one of the things that comes to mind when you see all the degradation of people right now that's happening because of the government imposition, and especially the small business, is occurring because on the first hit, essentially, people turned the other cheek, and there was no immediate response to it. So there's no like, hey, defending yourself, and so then it's just accelerated. And you're right. There was no tit for tat, so we get another more hits, and people just seem to be taking them, and it's much harder now to fight back.
Absolutely correct. Pacifism is not a good survival strategy. It really isn't. It just encourages the psychopaths and sociopaths. So you're absolutely right, and that certainly fits into the way people are reacting to following orders from their betters during this COVID hysteria. So then Emily, as you pointed out, goes on to talk about the 10 Commandments. They echo my values, Doug's values. The country was founded on Judeo-Christian values. Well, look, you go over the 10 Commandments, and I guess they occur at two places in the Old Testament, in Exodus and Deuteronomy. And they're more or less the same, I guess, in both places. But although the Catholics, the Protestants, and the Jews don't have exactly the same 10 Commandments, those three religions. But okay, let's talk about the 10 Commandments. Well, look, the first three are believe in God, don't believe in God, saying, to pay attention to or to respect the ruling superstitions of your society. In other words, if everybody kind of believes in something, you got to believe in something, which we've talked about in the past. We have to respect that. So let's say that's what the first three commandments are about, where Yahweh is talking about, it's all about him. So we could reinterpret it to within that context when all these people had in those days was their religion. Everything came from the religion. So, okay, that's fine. You got to kind of respect the foundation of whatever your society is. And then you go on to the other ones. Honor your father and mother. Yeah, okay, that's wisdom. I mean, they took care of you. You got to take care of them. Treat them well. Don't steal. Okay, that's a pro-survival thing. Common sense, I'd say. Don't commit adultery. Yeah, I mean, if you're married, you're going to destroy your marriage probably that way and make the kids unhappy and get into all kinds of financial trouble. That's wisdom too. What are the rest of them?
Well,
don't
do
bear
not kill.
Huh?
I would say thou shalt not kill, right?
Yeah, and of course, this is something that we discuss in Assassin a lot, because a lot of that book is talking about, is it good or bad? And what's the difference between killing somebody and murdering somebody? And does it serve a useful purpose? So, and does do the 10 Commandments actually say, thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not murder, which is different? Well, I talk about that in the novel, and it's kind of interesting. So I'm ambivalent about that one. Some people just need killing, quite frankly. But then what are the other ones? We talked about don't steal.
You said the bear false witness.
False witness. Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, they say, well, that's the same as do not lie. But actually, it's not, because it's good for your personal psychology to honor the truth. But at the same time, that's why I don't like to tell lies. But at the same time, do you owe everybody the truth? And the answer to that is no. For instance, when the IRS asks you about your income, well, in my opinion, you don't owe them the truth, although it's usually wise to tell them the truth because they might investigate you and then make your life very inconvenient. If a stranger walks up to you on the street and asks you a question, which would be impertinent anyway. Do you owe them the truth? And the answer is no, you don't. You might want to give it to them just because it'd be fun, perhaps. But so that commandment, do not lie, is different from bear false witness about your neighbor, which is basically committing a calumny against somebody else. So I think that's a good idea too. I mean, so actually, the 10 Commandments are just common sense across all cultures. Judeo-Christian values, well, they're just common sense values that people in all times and places generally have stuck to, or at least given lip service to. So I don't have a lot of patience for what are known as Judeo-Christian values, partially because people think that they, stem from a dictate from somebody named Yahweh. I've never met him, so, but
sometimes maybe I feel like there's when people say Judeo-Christian values, it's almost, and this might upset some people, but it feels like it's a stand-in. I mean, they're using that term, but what they really mean is the values of Western civilization. The rule of law, like the following the facts and science and the scientific theory. Like, it seems like it's more those things that they might mean, but they don't understand that those aren't necessarily directly connected.
I think you're absolutely correct. If you say Judeo-Christian values, you're really what Western civilization itself is built on. And I forget, did we do a conversation on what I've put my finger on as being the 12 cornerstones of Western civilization?
We did.
What the fruits? Yeah. Well, I guess it would be a good idea to refer back to it. I hope
I'll
we did
link to
it well. And I don't know it. Okay.
All right, we did.
Good, I don't know if we would have. I don't know if we would have covered the fact that almost all the good things we have today are direct fruits of Western civilization. And you wash away Western civilization, there's an excellent chance you're going to wash away the things that arose from Western civilization. So that's worth talking about. But now forget this Judeo-Christian thing. Anyway, what's the next thing? The next paragraph that Emily's got.
So Emily says that you said before that Scotland's William Wallace failed and should have folded because the enemy was already in the gate. And she says, maybe I'm not remembering that correctly, in which case disregard it. But from her perspective, I don't see that William Wallace failed because Scotland maintained its independence for hundreds more years, and Wallace is an important figure in history who is seen as a hero and role model.
Okay. Well, yeah, and that movie with Mel Gibson, and incidentally, I think all of Mel Gibson's movies are well done and interesting, just as a by the way. But that was reasonably accurate. I mean, for a Hollywood movie, I mean, what was the fate of William Wallace? Well, he was hung, and then he was gutted, and his entrails were displayed before him, and then he was drawn and quartered, which meant horses were hooked up to each of his four limbs, and he was pulled apart limb from limb. That was a pretty gruesome way to go. So from his personal perspective, I don't think he played his cards quite right. I mean, we all got to die sometime, but I mean, that last 15 minutes or maybe a half an hour, I'm sure they tried to draw it out, of his life was most unpleasant. So what's the problem I have with William Wallace? Well, look, you want to get rid of a predatory foreign power in your country, in your culture, in your society. And bravo for William Wallace trying to do that. I guess my main argument was with his tactics. I think the best way to solve a problem like that is to cut the head off the snake. In other words, instead of getting your army of barbarians out there in the field to fight the kings armored and trained soldiers, generally not a formula for success. I mean, it varies, but a better way to do it would say, okay, it's the king that's giving orders to occupy and tax Scotland. What we really want to do is make an example of the king. We want to assassinate him. And I think that would have been much easier to do. And this is something that I go into in Assassin in a lot of detail, actually. The advantages of cutting the head off the snake as opposed to mounting an army and then fighting the other guy's army, and all that happens is a bunch of common people get killed. That
Exactly.
serves a useful purpose. So anyway, that's my riff on William Wallace, and
That's good.
should have done.
Okay. All right. So the next question is
What's
asking if you've
next?
ever, they're wondering if you've ever done a personality test, specifically the Big Five personality test. You ever taken anything like that, Doug? Do you know where you stand on those tests?
Yeah, listen, I guess almost everybody likes to take brief personality tests. Like there's that little one that asks you 5 questions, and then you figure out where you are on a scale. The
Freedom Index,
y-axis is
libertarian or something, right?
freedom, and the x-axis is economic freedom. Okay, so on that one, I'm way up in one corner. So that's kind of a personality test. That's a belief test more than that. I went on Jordan Peterson's website to look for the 5 traits that he's come up with defining personality. I don't know, did you do that or not? Did you bother doing that, Matt?
Actually, I did do it years ago. Yeah, this Big Five is one of the core methodologies for measuring personality that's been used by psychologists for the last few decades, really. So, and yeah, he has a place on his website where you can do it. But I did it through another source before that.
Okay, the 5 that I got here are enthusiasm, withdrawal, compassion, industriousness, and openness. So, yeah, I took that. Pretty happy with the results. I can be enthusiastic. Assertiveness, that's the other thing. That's withdrawal. Yeah, I'm avoid in the face of volatility. No, I'm not very volatile. Compassion. Yeah, I'm pretty empathetic. Politeness. Yes, I prefer to be polite. Industriousness. Yeah, pretty industrious, I think. Orderliness. Yeah, I prefer order. And openness. Yeah, I feel I'm pretty open. Intellect. Interested. Yeah, great. Okay, that's great. So you got to go into this in a lot more detail. I don't know.
Yeah, it's worth I think I agree with you. I think people are very interested in these kinds of things, and I think that it's like in marketing we would make a joke about how people subscribe to Cosmopolitan magazine just for these silly Cosmo surveys that they have in every issue, and and they were all basically whatever your answers were made you feel good about you.
Right.
They surely were very unscientific, but I do find these tools useful. I actually use them in hiring. I don't use this one in particular in hiring, but I use lots of tools like this in hiring people, just so that I can, not that certain categories are better than others. I really don't think that they are, but it actually, because it depends on the role that they're filling in the company and things like that. So you compare what you're seeing in these what are considered objective tools, I guess, and comparing that to what you're seeing in an interview in order to understand the person a little bit better, make sure that they're the right person for the job. That even if they're a good person, you don't want to put them in the wrong job that doesn't fit their sort of predispositions. So I find them very, very useful and very interesting, and if nothing else, very entertaining. I even did, my girlfriend, I had her do 4 of these types of things when we were early on when we started dating. So that it was kind of like, it's like kind of an interview. I wanted to make sure that what I was seeing jived with what, the objective information was saying based upon my experience with these in interviews. So I think that they're useful, and it doesn't hurt for you to have a little better understanding or perspective on how you might operate when you're not paying attention. What's your default settings kind of.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like going through my list of the 9 P's or analyzing. You can have kind of your own 9 P's for people that you got to check so that you don't get
Exactly. Okay, hold on, let me just bring here a second.
to assess the moral character of people before you hire them, because you don't want to invite a 5th column within your company. And his test is intended to determine people's moral character and what their views of the world at large are. But I guess you've taken I guess the biggest one is the Meyer-Briggs test. Have you taken that one?
Yes, I have. Yep. Yeah, I am a INTJ is what they classify it as.
Yeah, very predictable. I too am an INTJ, and most libertarians, I think, are INTJs, and that corresponds with the fact that INTJs on the Meyer-Briggs test, and anybody that's listening can Google that. We're only about 2.4%, I think I saw the number of people are actually INTJs. And what are INTJs? I, that stands for introversion, as opposed to extroverted. Yeah, I guess. N, I forget what the N stands for, but
It's intuitive
it has
sense.
to do with.
It's intuitive sense. So you have
Oh, yes.
your guidance about the world comes more from your own representation of it rather than like external validation, is the way that I understood it.
I think that's right. Yes. So yeah, we'd both be that. And the T is thinking, stands for thinking. Place a bigger emphasis on logic and objective information. And the J is judgmental, as opposed to, I think, aren't there 4 possibilities,
Yeah.
or are there just 2 with these? But yeah, I've always liked Anne Rand's line. She's, when somebody asked her, well, Miss Rand, aren't you being judgmental? And after all, the Bible says, judge not, lest ye be judged. And Rand responded, no, judge and prepare to be judged, which I thought was a very good comeback. And
That's great.
so anyway, so I think everybody that's listening to this might want to Google Meyer-Briggs and take the test and see where they are.
Yeah.
Chances are good you're INTJ if you're listening to this, my guess. And that's the reason why we'll never get a huge number of subscribers, because we're only 2.5%, they say, of the population.
Right. It's probably true. Let's see. So let's go ahead and go to her next point that Emily was making, which I think is really important, because she asked one, what your thoughts are on some well-known conservative media people like Ben Shapiro and other folks at the Daily Wire. But I think the big question really is about, we've talked about before how it seems like it's hopeless. It seems like it's hopeless right now. But she says, there are 74 million people who voted for Trump. So she thinks that, don't you think that that's some bulwark against Marxism? Like, don't you think that will help? And, this Yeah, what are your thoughts on her question or her comments about that?
Well, okay, that's good. Uh, but the fact they voted for Trump, I mean, look, I don't support Trump except for the fact that he's a cultural conservative. From an economic point of view, monetarily insane. Uh, he is deregulating where he could. Okay, that's all good. He's a nationalist, not good. He's actually a jingoist. He's beyond nationalism. So, do I support Trump? Uh, no, except that he's a cultural conservative. He'd like to preserve kind of the general values of America back when the United States was still America. Okay, I'm all for that. So, insofar as that's true, I think that's why most people support Trump, or some people support Trump. They support him because he's not uh, Harris, whatever, Kamala is her, yes,
Yeah.
or is it Kamala? I've forgotten. Yeah, so, okay, fine. That's 74 million people that don't like Kamala. And look, unless we have a secession in this country, it's not really going to help because there were only a few hundred Bolsheviks that took over Russia, which at the time had like 120 million people. And, the Nazis were a relatively small movement in Germany, and they were kind of like Trump. I'm not talking about wanting to put people in ovens and all this type of thing. No, they were cultural conservatives, which, by comparison with the communists they were fighting against, yeah, they were better from that point of view. But that doesn't mean that these people are not libertarians, and Trump is at the end of the scale. So no, I don't find that's a compelling argument that Trump voters are going to bail us out from what's coming.
Yeah, and it feels like to me it's definitely it's just tribalism. I mean, yes, this is the Trump voters are on the side of they're against a group that feels more concerning to me, certainly. And so your bias is like, well, because we're against those guys that are worse, than what we support and what the causes and the politicians that we're behind are better. Well, that's true only in some areas. I think it's not true in every area. And what concerns me is that the you see things like the demands for more state power come from Republicans also, and I think that's the scary thing. I mean, they wanted the people are begging for Trump to declare martial law,
Yeah,
to keep because they feel like the election was robbed. Like, let's say the election was totally robbed. I agree 100% with that. Actually, it was,
yeah,
but
I
it
do
seems
too.
to me, and yet, do you want someone to declare martial law? Like, I don't see all of these things. Election being our rights as individuals are eroded when elections don't go right. That's true. Our rights are also dramatically limited when you have someone who starts, martial law. I mean, this is not good for us. I don't care what people say.
No, we'd be among the first people lined up against the wall. And when it comes to advancing personal freedom, fighting fire with fire is really dangerous. And saying, well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, no, not it doesn't follow. So not
So
good.
yeah, I think the thing is that the only way to defend the future personal liberties of Americans is going to be people who prioritize personal liberties of every American, not by people who are choosing a side in a political dispute, or by people who are advocating, more or less government power. I mean, really, it's all going to be coming from people who prioritize personal freedom, personal liberty. And if that isn't your lodestone, I just don't see how it ends up working out. And I think that's the reason why you and I believe that is kind of hopeless, because we just don't see many examples of people really bearing that cross very strongly.
Yeah. And I notice here, looking at another comment Emily made, she said, well, a lot of Americans have lots of guns and ammo, and maybe we can fight the bad guys and so forth. Look, the police and the military, first of all, they're loyal to their command structure and to their buddies. And then they're loyal to their employer, the government, and only then they're there to defend you. And they will fight against you if they're instructed to do so by the two more important orders I just mentioned. So don't put yourself in a position of William Wallace, okay? That's not a formula for survival.
Yeah, I didn't realize how those two ideas connected in her questions, but as if maybe that's what we should be doing. But no, we should definitely not be pursuing a William Wallace approach to things. I don't think at all. I think the ultimate end, if you have the ability to defend yourself, and I mean it's the fact that you have it is what often restrains someone from attacking you. Not like the use of that violence, once it's used, like it loses most of its power. It's in its potential to be used, that actually is where it has its best use for you, not when you actually start to deploy it. Do you agree with that idea?
Yes, I do. That's completely correct, because whenever you use violence, one of the big problems with it is that the other guy is not going to just roll over. He's going to try to kill you too. So, why put yourself in a position of danger when you can avoid it? This is why the art of the assassin and the old man of the mountain, so-called, during the First Crusade, who kind of crystallized the whole idea of political assassination, is if you're going to do anything, I mean, that's the way to pursue it, not by getting a bunch of yahoos out in the woods, attracting masses of police and military.
Right. Assuming that you can actually, that force will even be effective, right? Yeah, one of the things we do have, one of the most effective military support forces in the world. And if they actually, the reason our military is not successful is when it has missions that extend beyond its real scope, which, like our military, when I was in the Army, we learned that we were there for two things. That's it, really: to kill people and break things. It's when you add painting schools and winning hearts and minds and spreading democracy that our military does very poorly. But if its forces turned on anyone, you're in real trouble. I mean, there's not a good ending there.
No, not only that, but the military, I suspect, would overwhelmingly have been propagandized into believing that they're the good guys fighting for truth, justice, and the American way.
Yep.
And these terrorists and bad guys that should be exterminated. So no, I don't think that's a good idea. And I know you mentioned earlier that Emily brought up these people like, I know who Ben Shapiro is. I don't know the other names that she mentioned, but I guess they're kind of trying to fight the culture war. And my view on it is it's going to do about as much good, I think, as fighting the culture war at the end of the 4th century would have for a Roman who saw things coming apart and tried to, get people to read Cicero and Roman classics to, return to the halcyon days of the Republic. That wouldn't have stopped the collapse of the empire at that point. And that's where we are right now. So you can't stop it. I mean, you can try if it makes you feel good, and it's a moral value, and but you're not going to change the big course of history. I'm afraid it's not going to happen. It never happens.
And I think of these guys, and I don't. I think of these guys in particular that she mentioned, and they all seem like they're, I'm not questioning them, and they're good guys, and they're interested in, much more conservative values. But at the end of the day, it's a media network that they have. Their number one goal, is to gain an audience, and so they're feeding the audience what the audience wants to hear. And we see this as, if you watch CNN, what you're seeing is what they believe their audience is interested in hearing, that'll keep them engaged longer. It's the same thing you'll see on Fox News, is what they think will keep their audience engaged longer is what they do. And there might, I'm not saying individual journalists that show up are not sincere in what they're doing. I'm just saying the programming of these networks is designed to draw an audience. And so there's a huge conservative audience, clearly, and they're trying to, they set up their programming to serve that audience. And so you have to wonder, like, are you just the customer? Are you just there so that they can, keep the ad money coming in? Because is what they're about. That is their primary motive. You have to believe that. And then one other thing about it is, it seems to me that they represent the same conservatism, which has basically negotiated unsuccessfully with progressivism for my entire life. And the ball moves, but all they do is they're not offering an actual alternative. They're just negotiating against progressivism and giving up ground every day along the way.
Yes, I think you're right. And I get the impression from Emily's question and from what I remember about what I've heard about Shapiro, is that one of their big hobby horses is China. China is the big enemy. Look out for China, fight China. Well, look, this is another of these big trends in history that's worth talking about, perhaps. But the trouble is that fighting China, how do you do that? Are you going to have World War III? Well, that's guaranteed destruction for both China and the US, okay? Number one. And war is the health of the state. So even if you win the war, you're going to lose the war. But in addition to fighting China, most of these people say, yeah, China's been really, really successful over the last 30 years. We should be more like China. And that's an idiotic comment, because not more like what China is today, which is what the US is turning into. I mean, we're getting a social credit system, we're getting a digital currency, we're getting a more powerful government. So actually, these guys are cutting their own throats, even though they seem like they're pro-American. They're actually anti-American from a historical sense, I think.
That's interesting. I think the biggest thing where I think that kind of ties a lot of Emily's questions together is, there are groups and there are ideas that they tend to often overlap with our own thinking. And you think about some of you went through the 10 Commandments for instance, and you went through those, and like, there's no reason no one disagrees with those. You might word them a little bit different and might explain what they mean in a slightly different way, but they're good for society. So those ideas make sense for us. And then at the same time, a lot of the conservative ideas, they feel like directionally correct, because especially as a reaction to what we see with the slide of progressivism. But the only chance to really what there's a shortage of, I guess, is for people to be thinking for themselves, thinking independently, thinking more clearly, and having a better philosophical framework by which they operate in the world. And I think that's what's mostly lacking. And until there's some evidence that there's more people, acting in the world with that frame of reference, I like you feel like it's hopeless.
Yeah, because there are more people that are on the other side from us, simply because of the education system, starting in kindergarten, where they're infused with all the wrong values. So certainly at the moment, we are on the wrong side of history.
Mm. Doug, there's one more thing with the personality traits we talked about earlier. One of them, and Jordan Peterson, he speaks about this a lot, is what they call agreeableness. And agreeableness, and it's not actually defined the way it seems like it might be when you first hear it. So there's a spectrum is agreeable or disagreeable. Now, what it means, if you're close to it, if you're an agreeable person, what it means is that you feel uncomfortable not viewing the world the same way as others around you. It makes you more cooperative with others. You tend to adopt the ideas of your peer group more easily, for instance. And when you're disagreeable, it's not that you're actually argumentative or confrontational or anything like that. What it is actually is that you don't you're very comfortable having ideas that the people around you are disagree with, I guess. It
Hmm.
doesn't bother you.
Well, that would certainly be where I fit on the way I've always described that as you can either be have a radar directed personality or a gyroscopically directed personality. Two of the basic ways that a missile is guided. And if you're radar directed, you're always pinging other people to see where they are. But if you're gyroscopically directed, you go where you're going to go and you don't pay attention to the other people. So I definitely go for the radar, for the gyroscopically directed, or that would be, I just like to hang around with people that I share values with. That's the important thing.
Right, but you don't adopt your values for the people you happen to be around. Right? You don't like
I'm always interested in. Oh, did I get cut off or
No, I heard everything
did
you
you?
said. It's just when I was trying to respond. I was saying that, yeah, you like being around people who share the same values as you, of course. However, you are disagreeable in that you are not going to adapt your worldview or values based upon the people that you happen to be surrounded with, which is why you and I have talked about this before. There's a lot of people in our, I guess, friend group. The people we know are people who, when as they were growing up, felt a bit like aliens. They felt like they didn't really relate to necessarily the people that were right around them, and a lot of us have sort of met up later in life. But whereas I think a lot of my friends, what I grew up with, sort of adjusted their views or their perspective to match what was around them rather than stay an alien, I guess, because it sucks being an alien. It really is.
Yeah, exactly. When I go to high school and college reunions, uh, I still like, all the guys, uh, most of the guys still like them, about philosophical issues because I get the impression that most of them are, running with the herd, collectivist, statist, highly conventional. So once you get beyond talking about the weather and sports and the state of the roads, that's where relationships start breaking down. When you talk about the things you're third rail things, namely religion and politics. And of
Yeah,
course, it's funny because everybody says, yeah, I love talking about philosophy, but practical and applied philosophy is religion and politics. And
exactly.
yeah, so they really don't like talking about philosophy anyway.
No, they don't. They don't. Well, this is good, Doug. I thought Emily's questions are really good and really thoughtful, and she's a sincere and consistent viewer of our channel. So I appreciate her doing that. And we will. I also just love in general when we get questions from the audience that we can answer. So I'm going to link to two things in this video specifically that we've talked about. One of them is we talked about a video we did in the past about Western civilization and the characteristics of Western civilization that make it unique. So I'll link to that. And then, of course, I'll link to Assassin, because that's if you really want to think about, rather than a William Wallace type stand against the world, and I'm not saying we should take it, we actually stand like any of these at all. But thinking this way is better. Like thinking about the problem that the way that Charles Knight, our hero in Assassin, does is certainly a more productive and effective way of thinking about the challenges we face in the world.
Yeah, yeah, I certainly think so. But we're a tiny minority, as we know, and probably what we think doesn't amount to a hill of beans. It's basically for our own mental hygiene and amusement.
That's right. Well, well, good enough. Is there a better reason? I don't know. Could there
No,
be
I
a
don't
better
think
reason than
there
that?
is
Yeah,
actually. Oh,
yeah.
I actually don't think there is a better reason to do anything.
Good. All right. So we'll leave it at that for today, Doug. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's New Year's Eve, so I don't think we'll be doing one on New Year's Day, but I do want you to be thinking about your New Year's resolutions. I don't even know if you're a New Year's resolution guy at all, but
No.
I think next time we get together, I'd like to talk about some of those.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a worthwhile thought. Okay, good idea, Matt.
All right. Take care, Doug. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks.